Hello and welcome everybody to this panel. Today I have the HWA Wellness, that's Horror Writers Association, in case you don't know, Wellness Committee co-chairs Dave Jeffery and Lee Murray. The mental health initiative is turning out to just be an incredible resource, opening conversations, much needed conversations, providing resources. Let's find out more about this important program. How about each of you introduce yourselves and tell me a little bit about what you do for the HWA Wellness Committee? Who wants to start? I'll say Dave. Dave is moving. We'll get Dave.
Be the boss. Be the boss.
Okay. What do I do for the HWA Wellness Committee? In terms of the mental health initiative. What we do a lot of background work. There's a lot of coordinating that goes on behind the scenes. Most of it done by Lee, I have to say. She kind of keeps me in check. But yeah, I mean, my background is mental health. I worked in the NHS in the UK, that is, for around 35 years, working in various roles within the NHS, and part of that role was around things such as mental health nursing and also risk management as well. So I guess one of the things for me as a writer of speculative fiction and horror, dystopian horror, is kind of the contention that's always been there between somebody who is a healthcare professional writing in a field that potentially, or writing within a genre that potentially brings itself into contention with mental health, based purely on some of the portrayals of mental illness in certain areas of the field, I guess. So that's kind of me in terms of my background and what I tend to bring to the Wellness Committee.
Awesome. How about you, Lee? I think you have to unmute real quick.
Yeah, sorry about that. My dog is going crazy. Somebody must be walking their dog early this morning. And my husband is trying to sneak around me, so it's really rather amusing.
my phone went off right before this started, so I was like, oh.
Thank you, and thanks for inviting us to the In Your Right Mind conference. It's really wonderful to be here to be able to talk about our work on the Wellness Committee. The reason I got involved is, well, to be honest, I was asked a few years ago to contribute to the discussion about mental health and horror, because I'd implemented a panel at StokerCon, and it was, I think, the first time we'd really talked about it, and it was because I have depression and anxiety myself. I thought, well, this is a discussion that we haven't been having, and so many of our iconic writers, Stephen King and Sylvia Plath, and all of this very dark writers, Shirley Jackson. There's a bit of, there's quite a bit of research around the fact that many of them suffered from mental illness during the course of their lifetimes, and actually put out some incredibly valuable work. And Stephen King, for example, talking about his addiction. So I introduced an initial panel, and then I got invited to be part of a very short blog series several years back. And I approached Dave to say, Dave, I don't know much about this, and would you come on board and write a conversation with me, and let's have a little bit like this, really. And we had such fun doing it, but also it opened my mind to some of the possibilities and some of the issues that exist in horror, because to a certain extent we haven't done a great job. We've kind of just exacerbated the issues around stigma, and we've been a little bit lazy, perhaps, I think, in the past, or perhaps we haven't been open-minded enough about the kinds of portrayals of mental health in horror that we've been seeing. And so anyway, we did this wonderful back and forth, and I really enjoyed it, and I think Dave enjoyed it too. And we put out an essay, And then a few years later, Jim Chambers said to me, approached a number of us who'd been involved in that initial initiative, we should be doing more, and what should we do, and who wants to jump in? And everyone sort of took a step back and was very quiet, because naturally he was asking all the busy people, the people who are already very involved in things. And anyway, it just was too important to let go, I thought, personally. I thought, especially with the pandemic and people being isolated, and it was very clear that people were struggling with mental health. Just even everyone was dealing with this anxiety around COVID-19 and financial pressures and isolation. And everyone was using art and writing and reading and films and actually consuming art as a way of escaping from the reality of the world. So there was, on the one hand, the impetus was really right. The time was right, because we had everybody sort of had an understanding. Even if you didn't have a mental health issue, you had an understanding of it, because we were living something very real. So that lived experience became a little bit more, oh, hang on a minute, I can empathize with that. And then, just the timing just felt right. So I jumped in, and of course, the first person I thought of was Dave, because we'd had such a good experience working together previously. I kind of twisted his arm off his back and said, Dave, I can't do this by myself. I need you. You need to come on and do this with me. And because, my background is, I'm just a writer. I have no clinical or, work experience in this area, so I just come from my own lived experience. And so I really needed Dave's expertise on board just to help me out and make sure I wasn't floundering into something, and then we got this amazing team on board. Everyone was very excited. They brought so much, in the way of skill. We've got a number of practitioners, our mental health practitioners or previous practitioners on our team. People like yourself, Angela, just brilliant at pulling together people and organizing things and, cracking the whip. And so we've just got this great team. And so we got together and the initiative arose out of that. So that's my experience. It's kind of a bit of press ganging and a bit of guilty pressure, I think.
I'm going to say a lot of press ganging, perhaps. But,
I wasn't going to say anything.
It hasn't actually been hard, because once we were all together, everyone had great ideas. And one of the things has been kind of keeping it small and contained to start with, so we don't overstep our reach and do things, go beyond what we're capable of, and just start small and work our way out. And things have occurred to us as we've gone along, and the program has expanded. But I think the plan was just to stay small and just keep it manageable, and not make too many mistakes, hopefully, on the way. We know we're going to make mistakes, but we just wanted to avoid just sort of blundering in and trying to do too much. So I think, although it may look from the outside that we haven't done a great deal, I really feel we've come such a long way in the few months since we kind of got going. So
I think you bring up a good point of, setting boundaries and recognizing limitations as a committee, which is showing exactly that is a healthy behavior for mental health. A lot of times I know personally, the more stressed I am, the busier I get, because I'm trying to avoid dealing with whatever I should be dealing with, which is not a healthy, thing. So I think the committee is actually mirroring by setting those boundaries and everything. So that's just me saying, good on you guys. I want to back up a little bit, just for people who may not be members of the HWA here at this, which I'm going to say why, but I will keep my bias of how awesome our organization is to myself right now, because I've already just plugged it. But I want to back up a little bit and explain what is the initiative for anybody who maybe isn't familiar with what's going on over on the Horror Writer Association side with our blog and with the social media and stuff. So who wants to just kind of give like a bare bones rundown of what the initiative is and what it's doing?
I mean, the bare bones rundown is that it's I think the key to all this is it's a coordinated effort. I think that's what we're trying to do. It's a series of events. It's a series of, I guess, activities that we get members to contribute to. If you go onto the blog now, there are lived experience pieces. There is the of horror and hope anthology that's been pulled together. But what we're saying is that even those things are being done for members and by members, it is not exclusively for members, because people can access the more open parts of the HWA site and still access this stuff. We're not being, I guess, we're not being elitist about this. This is such an important issue for the genre, and certainly for people who suffer with mental illness and have existing mental health issues. It's about sharing that information so that there is I guess the politic of this is that it's about inclusion, because if we think about mental illness in, like, I guess, in terms of the treatment programs that are out there, for example, or the paradigms that are out there, you've got what they call a recovery paradigm, which basically is about instilling hope in an individual that feels hopeless because of their mental illness. And I think that's one of the constructs that seems to disappear with people when they feel they've got, their future is being, or their present and potentially their future has been dominated by their own mental health issues. So inclusion and empowerment are key elements of recovery. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to instill that within the initiative itself by giving people forums, giving members a forum by which they can empower themselves through creativity, because we know that there's a link between recovery and creativity. I mean, the evidence base out there is pretty solid in terms of qualitative data out there on that. So this initiative is about that, but it's also about having it, I guess, making sure that it's sustainable as well, because it's easy. I guess it's not easy, but we with a coordinated effort at the front end, we can start to develop things like we're doing in terms of all those things I've mentioned. But then there's potential for that to just drop off. Unless the momentum's there. What we're looking at doing within the Wellness Committee, and I think that's where the Wellness Committee really does kick in. And the fact that, John Palisano has kind of rubber stamped this as the president of the HWA, is that momentum keeps going. So that's what fundamentally, that's what the initiative is. That's not quite the bare bones that you asked for. It's kind of the bare bones with just a little bit of meat on it,
Yeah.
But that in essence is what it is. It's about empowering individuals, and it's about inclusion with a pure focus on recovery.
Awesome. How about Lee? Do you have anything to add to that? But unmute.
Sorry.
No, absolutely.
Worried about my dog going crazy. I just totally agree with everything Dave says. I mean, what are we doing? And I guess one of the things is, it's that shared experience and inclusion towards empowerment. It's giving writers a bit of a toolkit, we hope, down the line. We hope to be able to give them a bit of a toolkit, because they'll say, well, what is a good representation of mental health in our, in literature? And so, we need to work towards that. So that's something I think we will be aiming for in the future. Obviously we've had discussions around research and, authentic voices, etc. But we need to do a little bit better to support our writers when they're coming to write a piece of work and they want to use look at the psychology, for example, of a character, then we need to give them the tools to find the right kind of representation, so that they can make their stories authentic and real and not fall into those old tropes. So there's a bit of that, but that shared inclusion and empowerment is a big part, but also that removal of the stigma. As soon as you start sharing that, oh, I feel that too. One of the things I thought was wonderful, which I saw just yesterday on social media, because we've had this series of blogs by our members go out over the past few weeks. And the response has been very exciting just to see. And just one little interaction that I noticed on one post where someone wrote, "Oh my gosh, I didn't know anyone felt like this. I thought it was just me." And then the other person jumped in and said, "Oh yes, I thought it was just me." And so it was just this wonderful connection between two people who realized they weren't alone in the way that they felt. And also the piece of writing was just beautiful and stunningly done. And it resonated for me personally, but I just think, wow, that's the point of writing, isn't it? We want to be able to touch readers in ways that are, that are authentic, but just touch people's hearts and make a difference and have an impact. So I'm excited about that. That feels like, and in terms of what we're doing, okay, so these are our goals. This is the kind of thing that we want to do. But how are we doing it? Well, we've put together a charter of and that sort of evolved. We never planned to do that, but that kind of evolved out of our work, like, oh, what's the measure for which we're looking? What's our sensitivity test for this piece of writing or this piece of work? And then Dave came and did a lot of work in a very, very short time. And oh, yes, how do we encapsulate these ideas that we've just been talking about, inclusion and empowerment and authenticity and reducing, how do we encapsulate that in a document? So Dave's written a very, very good charter which is, I think, is going to be an organic document. I think that will move as we learn more and we go forward in this initiative. So that's been an important piece of work, and already we've added to that just as we've been working through with various panels. So other things we've been doing are the Of Horror and Hope blog, which has been going this month, and that will be brought together in a little anthology of experiences and reflections, short fiction and poetry. It's about 20,000 words, so it's not as small as I had thought it would be, and that will be embedded on our dedicated webpage for anyone to download and just read and enjoy and perhaps be inspired by. And from there, we've also got the dedicated webpage with various resources for a number of countries where we have members to start with. That may be expanded as we go, move forward, but that's our start point. Plus, some other bits and pieces, resources up there. So, we're moving that way. We've got the Holistic Horrors column, which is part of the HWA newsletter program. So every month we'll have a guest blogger or an article or a report on a panel. We've been running a number of panels like this one. So we're reaching out and talking to our members to say, what else do we need? What else should we be doing? So I'm quite excited about what's happening. And it sounds like a small amount of work, a small number of projects that we've been doing to start with, but actually it's been a huge amount of work just learning. Oh, and I should say we've had a number of wonderful horror sites, who've come on board to promote the initiative, to put up some guest posts. We've had some really interesting articles coming out from a number of members who've reached out to us and said we'd like to write something. So that's been exciting to us too, just the response to it. And so it seems like, so although we're sort of saying, here's our kind of goals, those things have manifested in some smaller projects, which have been things like panels, and we're getting there. Dave's been on the radio, and it's just, he's so famous. So the plans, it starts small and work our way out, and hopefully reach people that need to hear from us. but also make a real change in horror writing and the way we present mental health in our work. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think a large part of that is just removing the feeling of isolation, that we are all sharing. We're all burdened by the same things. And if we recognize it in each other, it's less of a burden, because we can share it. How about you, Dave? Did Lee miss anything there about the program and, the resources and the assistance?
No. I mean, I think Lee's encapsulated it all really. But she did mention about the panels that we've done, both online and kind of face to face now. Now we've had like kind of StokerCon recently, and we had ChillerCon in the UK, HWA ChillerCon in the UK. There were 2 mental health panels programmed at those events. So. And the feedback from those events, I did a virtual one for the StokerCon virtual platform, and had Todd Keisling, Mercedes Yardley, and Teresa Durbin on that as well, who shared some incredible experiences. It was a great panel, and the feedback on that has been amazing. And the ChillerCon panel that I did. I had Tiffany Angus on that. I had Paul M. Feeney on that. I had Sally Ann Bedford on that, and the awesome Ramsey Campbell, of course. So, and the response from that particular panel again from the audience, being able to have the audience there, I think was quite special because the feedback was immediate in terms of the kind of things that people wanted from that. And as Lee mentioned earlier on, I think people, they want to know that they're not doing anything wrong. I think that's the key thing. They don't want to feel like they're perpetuating that stigma inadvertently by perhaps inadvertently, I guess, writing the wrong things or, using tropes that potentially add to that level of stigma. But I think for me, it's very much about giving people the information and not try. I think one thing we need to be clear about, and I'm sure Lee would support this, we're not trying to stifle people's creativity. What we're saying is, if you're going to portray mental illness in your stories, then do it with a degree of authenticity and a degree of respect for people who do suffer. And I think we're kind of in a position as I guess as a profession that there are so many people within the writing community who do suffer with their own kind of mental health issues. And it's about like kind of having that level of insight and being able to I guess translate that onto the page and feeling that that's a safe space as well. So those panels were a really good vehicle to get that message across. So so for me, I think with respect to Lee, there is it's a huge amount of work that goes behind it. But I think it's having people like Lee on board and the wellness committee on board, to drive this stuff. That's just not, these things wouldn't happen without people of that character to drive it forward. And for me, seeing that stuff, seeing the discussions that happen afterwards, seeing 2 or 3 people on social media interact because of something we put out there, that's special. That's special.
Awesome.
Yeah, I mean it's rewarding, isn't it, Dave? I mean, that's just, yes, there's been a lot of work, but it's just so rewarding when you see those small interactions and you think, no, that's the whole point. That is the whole point, isn't it, of what we're doing. And one thing I do want to say, though, and is that, our role is not to provide therapy. And we really we've had to sort of be very careful. We're not going down the track of, I don't have the skills for certain, our role is, and although we do have a number of people in the HWA who've reached out to us who are clinicians and practitioners, we we're not in the business of providing therapy. You know, we're happy to sort of say, here are some resources, go here and get help. And we certainly want people to get help if they need help. But that is beyond the scope of our initiative. We're really just trying to raise awareness and provide resources for our writers, and just to let the wider community know that this is an issue that we intend to address going forward, and we need to do better. But therapy is just not in the remit, and so we need to make that very clear from the outset, that we're not a source of therapy. I don't think you'd get very good therapy from me. I don't know what I'm talking about. But yeah, I do think though that it is just we just have so much opportunity to do good through our writing and through creativity. I mean, as Dave said, there's very good evidence that creativity is a way through these dark moments, and for a number of us, and I know for myself that if I get out and do some painting, or I'm doing some writing, or I can scribble out a poem, even if it goes nowhere, I know I feel better. So we do have, as writers and as a community, we have a great opportunity not only to provide these, to help, an escapism for readers, but we're also providing a way forward for ourselves. So, it's just a very exciting space to be in, and it can save lives. And I've told this story before, but in New Zealand we have a very iconic writer called Janet Frame, and she suffered from mental health. Number of mental health issues. She was very, very unwell, and the prevailing medical view at the time was to lobotomize, which is just very scary. And she was actually scheduled to, I guess they believed at the time they were going to give her relief, and so she was actually scheduled to have a lobotomy. But she had won a prize, a literary prize, and as a result of the literary prize, the doctors decided that they would not go ahead with it. So it actually, in effect, saved her life. So it's an anecdote, and it's obviously not typical, but it is. It clearly, the fact that she had written something creative and it had been recognised and acknowledged by the New Zealand Society of Authors, the doctors realized that actually, maybe they shouldn't do this, and they didn't. So, it can really save your life. So interesting.
Yeah, what a great story. That's like, no, I still have stories left to tell. They're all right here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And she was very open afterwards about her own. Yeah.
Well, how about?
I was reading. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was reading. This is a slight aside. I think it is relevant. I was reading Charlotte Gilman's The Yellow Wallpaper again the other day, reminding myself of that story, because there's, it's a great piece for showing how, not only in terms of, I guess, the gender issues around that particular time, but also how the treatments that were kind of laid out during kind of the late 1900s, where an individual was told that they, in order to rest from, like, I guess, nervous exhaustion, as they kind of called it back then, that you literally just like sat in a room and did nothing at all, and yet as that narrator in that story was, basically deteriorating because she wasn't able to be creative. And I think that's like a great, I guess, example of, I guess, an example from the 1900s about how it still has relevance today. So it kind of does have relevance. It does have relevance, doesn't it? Yes, it does. I threw that in.
I think it does have relevance.
It does.
Yeah, it's that we as writers want to do that research, don't we? We want to read and understand more. I mean, that's the whole point of writing, is that reading is understanding the human condition. So I think that's valuable, and I would love for us to be able to put together a set of good examples of why we think these are good examples of representations of mental illness in writing, because I think, as writers, we want to know what looks right, what is a good example, so that we can move forward from there and expand on that, because I think we've done a lot wrong in the past, and so moving forward, having those good examples will be helpful. I think, I know for me it will be helpful. I don't know every mental illness or the way people perceive things when they are in an episode, and it's probably very individual too. So I think more of that would be helpful. And I know that a number of the panels, we've had people recommend works that they had found valuable, Brian Kirk's We Are Monsters, and Henny Jones' Suffer Little Children, and I believe Catriona Ward's latest book, Needless Street, has a very good representation.
Yeah, it's got a good reputation.
Yeah, so I think I need to do a lot more reading. That's one of the things that we on the Wellness Committee are going to look to be doing, is hopefully collecting together some resources which will help writers going forward, of good examples of so that we've got a blueprint for moving forward. And that, and again, as I said, everything's organic, because we are learning so much more, and opening up the dialogue. The goalposts are likely to move, I'm sure. So I'm actually think it's very exciting, because the more people come on board, the bigger the conversation is, that the more we can do, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just having a curated list of reading, I think, would be invaluable. If that's all that came out of this initiative, I think that would be an incredible resource.
Yeah, I think that's probably next year or the
Well, you're building it now, but you have to actually get all the books read.
Yeah, and because there will be different viewpoints, of course. It's very subjective when you read, isn't it?
Well, just like any recommended list, you're not going to like or resonate with every single work.
Exactly.
But it gives you a good place to look.
Yeah.
I mean, I found one of the things that came out of the panel at Chilicon was that there was some individuals in there that would suggest that some of the more what I would consider to be contentious pieces, they got, with their own mental health issues, they got great comfort from. So I think we can't like talk in absolutes, because as we're all saying here, that people will get different things from different pieces. What we can say is that if you're going to talk about mental illness, and if you're going to talk about mental health issues, you make sure you do credible research, and then you apply it with a degree of sensitivity. That would work for me, and that's. But there are so many that people see things in you put three people in one room, they all see different. They see that space in a different way, don't they? So people are getting something from it, especially when we talk about the pandemic, and we have situations where people are isolated and they feel that they're not connecting with anything. Then if there's a piece of art on a screen or on a page, and they feel they connect with it and they get benefit from that, then I guess the jury's out on. I guess the jury's out in terms of who are we to say that you can't do that has no less credence than something else, So so it is a cautious approach, I guess, we're taking. And I think that's the right thing to do.
I think that just moving away from demonizing anyone with mental illness is probably the key thing, isn't it? It's just moving away from that stigma, and that they're automatically the villain, and evil, which I think is just, and I think Mercedes Yardley said it very well in the panel that you did for StokerCon, Dave, where she said, I'm a wife and a mother and a churchgoer, and I'm a writer, and I'm all these other things, and yes, I have mental illness, but I'm everything else, and I'm not defined by that. And I think that was a very powerful statement. She said it in much prettier words than that. Mercedes is very articulate, but it was, and especially someone someone as lovely as Mercedes, who just very, very much part of our community, to make that statement and be so courageous and brave to come out and say that. You know, I found that extremely empowering, but I think that is something we need to remember, is that we are not just, you know, I happen to have COVID at the moment. I am just not just someone with COVID, you know,
Yeah.
I am all these other things at the same time. And I think, you know, we need to remember that.
I think one of the things for me is because with mental illness, you can't see it. You can't see it. It's not like you've got a broken leg or you've got a broken arm or something, or you've got some physical, you know, in terms of you got like, you know, people can actually see what the issue is because people can't see it. I think that's where people feel that they automatically, the person who has mental illness suddenly become mental illness defines who they are, and that's just simply not the case. But I think because it's so isolating as an illness, and because it traps people within. I guess a broken leg and a broken arm, well, not so much a broken arm, but a broken leg can trap you in your own home, can't it? Whereas like mental illness can trap you in your own mind, and that's a very different and very troublesome place to be. So you can kind of understand why people have to make that statement that you are not defined by mental illness. You know, no one is defined by their mental illness.
I think,
but sorry, go ahead.
Oh,
Angela.
no. I was just going to say this. One of the things that's so important about what you guys are doing is because I think a lot of times, like I was hospitalized twice for mental illness when I was younger. And that experience was other people telling me what my experience was. Doctors telling me, parents telling me, other people, this is what we expect from you now that this thing has happened. And I think this initiative is opening the doors to say that is not necessarily your experience. That is not, and that's not all you are. You are all these other things, like you're saying. You know, it's a very hopeful and astounding program.
I agree, and I think, you know, Dave made a good point about you being isolated in your own mind, but also you were isolated in society. And I remember, you know, I've told this to Dave before, but for many years I was part of New Zealand, the local Alzheimer's committee, because my dad suffered for many years with dementia, and you know, we had a number of caseworkers who would go out to various people in the community, and they did hugely valuable work. And I remember, you know, we had a number of vehicles, and I was saying, well, why aren't we, you know, we're supposed to be promoting awareness. Why don't we have the name of the organization on our vehicles, you know, and that would really help to just, you know, they're driving around, people would just see them. And the case manager said, we can't do that because there is so much stigma with dementia, for example, that some of our clients ask us to park on the next street and walk to the appointments with our clients because their families and even the people, the sufferers, didn't want people to know that they had dementia. And this is the problem, isn't it? So not only are these people isolated with their mental illness themselves, but we are isolating them further with the stigma around those things. And so there is a lot of work to be done in sort of breaking down the stigma that we perceive people. So it is, as Mercedes says, we are more than just our mental health, and society needs to see that too, not just the people who have the illness, but the rest of us need to be a little bit more accommodating and understanding. And so if we can generate a bit of compassion through the work that we're doing at sort of open, then that would be fabulous. That would just be, you know, that moment of recognition, and that understanding and compassion. Just I would feel that we had done some good, you know, if we could do that.
Well, yeah, and I think just bringing out that neurodivergence can be a strength, and I think I'm seeing that in fiction a lot now. Is that maybe you're the nerd, or you suffer from these things and these tics or this behavior or whatever, but in the story we're using that as a strength because it is a strength. You know, it can be a strength depending on our perspective and how we use it.
Yes,
Absolutely.
yes, that's very important point actually, Angela. And Dave, you've explored this in your own work, with your own series, and
Yeah.
it's actually an interesting facet to look into when you're writing a piece. So yeah,
Mhm.
and I think that's a good point.
I mean, I tend to think about things around. I guess if I'm thinking about um, people that society would consider to be disabled, I don't like that term at all. But if you look at like culturally deaf people, for example, they don't consider themselves to be disabled. I worked with the deaf community for 10 years. Um, especially around things around mental health. And they consider their deafness to be their cultural identity. They certainly have their own language. They certainly have their own, I guess, culture in terms of they have their own literature. They have their own comedians, entertainment. It's very, very so. And you get that kind of content. The contention comes within that instance where you've got, um, I guess, you've got your traditional view of deafness, which is about it being a disability, and you need to have it improved with hearing aids and all the devices I've got in my head and all the rest of it. But does that detract, or does that somehow impinge upon people's cultural rights as a deaf person? The deaf community would say yes. But it depends on where you sit within that community, because if you are hearing parents of a deaf child, then your perception on that would be very different, because you'd be looking at it from the point of view of hearing parents and your child. So it is very complex. It's a complex issue, but from our perspective, bringing it back to, I guess, the HWA, mental health, writing, the horror genre, then it is about sending that clear message. It's about raising awareness about mental health. It's about not contributing to the stigma of it. It's about empowering individuals through creativity. So those components are strong within what we're trying to do within the initiative.
You
Excellent.
do make a good point about the cultural aspects of it, Dave, because,
Mm.
our cultural responses are very different depending on, where we're from and, our backgrounds. And I know have made this point before about the Maori community. There really wasn't such a thing as mental illness in Maori communities because
Mm.
they have the traditional ways of living in Maori communities was for everyone to have a role and everyone to raise children together. It was a very community-minded approach to
Mm.
society. It wasn't very individual as the Western approaches, and so there was no such thing as sort of mental illness because those people were just considered those people. That was them, and
Yeah.
they were nurtured for those qualities. And even the language around it is beautiful.
Mm.
I think the term for autism is that person who walks in their own path or something along those lines. The translation is rather lovely. Like makes them out those. So rather than disabled, they are abled in their own way. And I
Mhm.
think. So I think that those cultural aspects are interesting, and I notice that some of that has come through in the Of Horror and Hope anthology, that
Yeah.
there is a
Absolutely.
number of
Yeah.
cultural interpretations of
Mm.
mental health and well-being that are different from perhaps the traditional Western view, which I think is also something to be considered. What are those cultural differences, and how can we maybe look at some of those indigenous practices which
Yeah.
are actually perhaps more empowering than the Western approaches, which have been to isolate people with
Mhm.
mental illness and put them in
Mm.
asylums. And I know my dad's sister, my aunt, who I never met, died very young as she suffered from autism and had electric shock treatments. And I just
Mm.
think that's terrifying stuff. So I think the cultural differences in the way we approach things is another area we could learn a lot from. So, and of course, this is this is not we're not looking at therapy, we're not talking about changing with clinical practice or anything, but these are the things, aspects that we can look at in story and through our fiction and our writing, and look at how things are different. So I do think there are opportunities for plotting and story that that can be enlightening going forward. So
yeah, it's about
exactly.
understanding, isn't it? It's about understanding. I think one of the things that I'm really fascinated by is the history of mental illness now, and the different treatments that were around back in the Dark Age. We call them the Dark Ages.
and it's not that long ago,
It was the
sadly.
1900s. It was the 1900s onwards. But it's about. But for me, it's very much about mental illness. More often than not, is defined and shaped, in my view, and certainly in terms of some philosophers, by the society in which it sits. Victorian England, I mean, it wasn't by chance that they built asylums on a hill out of view of everyone else, because it was almost like putting societal mistakes out of it's a kind of out of sight, out of mind. And certainly in terms of, depending on where you are within the world, psychiatry has potential to be a tool for social control. We know that. We've had, I'm sure in some parts of the world, if you talk in antagonistic ways against the local, whoever happens to be in charge at that point in time, you may well find yourself dragged off to an asylum somewhere. It certainly happens in some parts of the world, so it's so monumentally complex. Psychiatry is a monumentally complex thing, which I'm just absolutely fascinated by. I'm just absolutely fascinated by that aspect of it. And I think when we look at some of the great stuff that we got from Avon and Hope contained within there, people's lived experiences, I just think it's great because, like as you say, Lee, we've got people writing coming from all over, giving their perspectives. And in terms of horror, I mean, I don't think I can recall any single volume that has ever done that. From a horror perspective, I don't think there's a volume that's ever done that. So this is groundbreaking stuff with what we're doing. So it's not. I don't say that lightly. There may well be fictional anthologies and whatever you, collections or whatever you, that talk about mental health in a fictional sense. But in terms of lived experience, I can't recall that ever happening before.
Yeah,
I
I think
think you're
it's
right.
just the generosity of our members coming forward,
Absolutely.
and we were hoping for 60, and we had so many, so many people write, and it's hard to turn them away because they're not, but we only had so much space, and so, the response was wonderful, that just that we heard that many people that were interested in just writing us something, and I hope that even just in doing that they felt empowered, and they felt themselves, that they could share their experience. I mean, it's hugely courageous to be able to do that, I think. So yeah, I'm very proud of what we're doing, and I'm hoping that it will touch other people, even beyond the reach of our membership. And we're talking to Seton Hill graduates and here at the In Your Right Mind conference, and we're hoping that other people will be interested in learning more, and will reach out and have a look at what we're doing with the initiative. I think that would be a step in the right direction for us, that we've touched other people, and we're extending our reach and bringing them all over to the dark side.
Well, I think the dark side is having a little bit of a golden heyday right now, especially with the studies, which I'm sure you've both read about, the studies that they found. Excuse my dog in the background choking up. You don't have hairballs. What are you doing? But they did the study, and I'm sure they paid a ton of money for this, the research that fans of horror writers, horror watchers and readers had better resilience than any other genre interest. during the pandemic. So, yay us, we already knew this. Obviously, we're here. But I think that's kind of one of the reasons why we are having this heyday. The eyes of the world are turning to our genre and realizing, oh, bad stuff can happen. And you be prepared, you deal with it. Sometimes the monster might win, but you accept that, and you have tools, you build your own toolkit. So, and I think that's kind of an incredible part of this whole initiative and what you guys are doing. So we are almost out of time, and I don't want to leave. I know, doesn't it go fast? And I'm like, there's like about a billion things that we could still talk about. So that's the after party, in the bar after this. But I do want to get a little bit about each of you personally, like what you're working on now before we close off this, what you're working on now, just all of the things, all of the interesting things about you guys. Lee, or whoever wants to start.
Go ahead, Dave. Please go ahead.
I'll keep it brief. What am I working on at the moment? Well, I've got a new book coming out literally in the next fortnight called Tribunal, and it's a dystopian horror, and it's set in a world where everyone is deaf, strangely enough. That's and it is pretty dark stuff, but yeah, it was a joy to write, but not in a dark way. It was great because it's all about social constructs. It's all about how people potentially do bad. Good people do bad things depending on the circumstances and perspectives. And then that's coming out through Domain Publishing, and then I've got to revisit my young adult series, Beatrice Beecham. I've got a new novel coming out through Crossroad Press, and that'll be next year. So I'm revisiting that, and that's me.
Where can we find you, Dave? Like, where, if I want more research on you,
can
where
find me on.
You?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Dave B. Jeffery, or you can visit my website, which is www.davejeffreyauthor.com.
Excellent. All right. I'm excited about those books. I'm going to go look those up. Especially walking the talk there with the themes of your books.
Yeah. He definitely is.
Yeah.
He definitely is.
Yeah. How about you, Lee?
Well, I'm way behind because, I've had COVID and I'm just completely behind on everything. So I have a couple of short stories coming out this month. One with, I think it's called Deep Down Under. It's a crime, New Zealand and Australian crime book from Clandestine Press with Craig Sisterson as the editor. And I have a Hounds of the Underworld story with Dan Raybart's in there. So it's called Rockabye Baby. And it's a kind of follow-up to our trilogy. So sort of supernatural crime story. So I'm looking forward to that one coming out. I also have a story in Dracula Unfanged from IFWG. Chris Sakira is the editor there, and that story is called Hot House Crush, and it's about sort of a reimagining of Dracula as something else. And in this case, he is a caretaker at a girls' school, and he's a little bit Lady Chatterley's lover, Mr. Melcher. So a little bit different. I'm currently writing another story for Al Baxter's Damnation Games anthology, which will be coming out a little bit later in the year. And I've just finished one for Gabby Triana's Alien Head Press, 13 Ghost Stories. I think it's coming. I can't remember the name of the book. It's just gone out of my head, but it's coming in time for Halloween, so that'll be fun. I wrote a story about a ghost cricket set in ancient China. So I really been having fun, a little bit of fun with some short story work. I'm currently writing a novelization of a screenplay that I wrote with Doug Van Bell. He's my New Zealand collaborator. So, and I've been way behind and he's been way ahead, rushing on, and I just need to get my bottom into gear and get on with that. But, you know, it's just, there's so many things to do and not enough time, unfortunately. So those are what I'm working on. What about you, Angela? What are you working on?
Oh, wow. That's an unexpected question. A bunch of things. I know we have Unquiet Spirits coming up, which is kind of the follow-on to Tortured Willows, and which was the follow-on to Black Cranes. And I'm super excited about that. I was just talking to somebody yesterday about Unquiet Spirits and what it is, and the types of voices that are in there. And then there's just a bunch of other things that I don't have my list. I have a new monitor, and I usually have a list up so that I don't have to get caught off guard, and I can just read it. And I have this new monitor, and so that's what's coming up, is I have this new monitor. So a bunch of things. You can always just go to my website, which is angelawysmith.com, and I try to keep it updated with that. And I didn't get your website, Lee.
leemurray.info. That's Lee with 2 E's.
Okay.
You can
So
find me there, and I don't send out too many spammy newsletters. In fact, I haven't sent one out since last year, so that's not too spammy at all.
Yeah, definitely no spam from our group.
We've got no time to write spam. We're too busy.
Exactly.
Anyway.
I was going to say, before we close, I just want to get a little bit of a statement from you guys about where do you see this going. We still have a few minutes, and I love the Horror and Hope initiative and everything that it can be. Where do you see, what are your thoughts? Like, how do you see that this could expand, or what do you hope for it to expand into?
It really depends on how much energy we have, because I don't see it stopping anytime soon. The number of people who are reaching out. Obviously, we're just about to the end of this year's program. I mean, you know, I'm not saying that it's just going to stop, but we had a number of events planned for this year, and then we'll start looking at next year's program and what we like to offer. And we've had lots of suggestions come from our membership and various people reaching out to us. So we will be looking to do that. Obviously, we'll keep the Holistic Horrors column going. That's going to be the cornerstone, really, of, you know, how we communicate with our members. But more broadly, what we will be doing, you know, in terms of the wider community, we need to look at that as a committee, bring on some new blood, I imagine. And you know, Dave and I will be there as long as we have the energy, and then, you know, obviously we'd like to get it sort of moving and the momentum built, and then step aside and let, you know, new people with new ideas come in. And so that's the kind of, that's how I see it. Dave, you better not drop out on me, or I'm going to be very upset.
No, I'm in for the long haul. I told you. You know this.
Yeah, hopefully he doesn't start in and go, well, I was done after this panel.
Yeah,
Goodbye.
that's it. I'm done. I'm not working with her again. And, you know, I wouldn't blame him, given the number of things. You know, every day I'm dropping stuff in his inbox saying, now what about this, and don't forget this. And so it does seem to be, there seems to be a lot going on. It may not look like it, you know, on the face of it, but certainly a lot sort of work going on behind the scenes to get us established and running. And so I don't see it going away anytime soon. I mean, the response has been phenomenal. So we'll just see where it takes us, and I think it does depend a little bit on the makeup of our committee and how that evolves, and who wants to jump in and do things. So yeah, I think the world's our oyster a little bit. You know, we're learning as we go, and we'll probably make some mistakes, and apologize in advance for that. But I'm very excited, and I think that the team we've had to start with has been brilliant, and we've learned a lot just in the process, and we'll go forward and see what happens. Certainly the membership seems keen for us to keep going, and we'll just see how it evolves.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on that, Lee. I mean, for me, it's about, I feel galvanised by the mere fact of the response that we've got from the membership. People need this. They might have wanted it, but I think the message that I'm getting is that people need this, and I think as long as people need it, then I'll be on board with this. And this is, I guess, this year is about laying the foundations to have something in place, having all the stuff in the background, all the I guess all the processes and what have you in the background to make this a sustainable thing, so that when the time comes that Lee and myself step away, someone is out to another group of people can come in, and they've got all the resources, they've got all the processes in place in order for this to seamlessly continue. Personally, I would like to see something, I guess, reaching out beyond the organisation in the coming years, and having meaningful engagement with the mental health charities, which we've got to build some bridges with, and we accept that. But we're hoping that if we've got some sustainability, we've got the evidence, that tangible evidence on the website of Horror and Hope, the charter, etc., the things we're building over the next year or so, just to give, just to demonstrate that we mean what we say when we want to change. So yeah, so that's the way I see it, I guess.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, both of you. You're both wonderful. Off screen and on screen. I can't say enough good things about both of you and this initiative and everything you're doing. So thank you. I hope this panel has
Angela.
been...
Thank you,
Angela.
You're welcome. And I hope this panel has been helpful for whoever's watching it, and you will look more into it. The Horror Mental Health Initiative of the HWA, Horror Writers Association. So, all right. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Bye-bye.
Bye.